In a small town just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, a boy ties one shoelace slower than the other every morning. Not out of laziness, but because it's the only moment in his day when he feels in control. That tiny ritual becomes his anchor in a world moving too fast. Most people think change demands grand gestures. But what if the secret isn't in doing more, but in noticing more? Today, I'll show you 5 habits that seem small, almost invisible, but they hold the quiet power to reshape your path, your purpose, and your sense of peace. I used to believe that if I wanted a better life, I had to flip everything upside down, move to a new city, quit my job, change my personality, start waking up at 4 a.m. like the self-help gurus in San Diego always said. But life doesn't work like a movie montage. Most of us don't have the luxury of burning everything down just to rebuild from scratch. We have rent, we have responsibilities, we have people counting on us. So what then? Do we stay stuck in cycles that quietly drain our spirit? Or do we look for a different way? What I want to offer you today isn't a 5-step program to perfection. It's 5 tiny shifts, habits so small they might seem laughable, but they work. Not because they're loud, but because they're consistent. They slip into your life without demanding attention, and over time, they begin to whisper a different story into your days. A story where you feel more present. A story where your reactions don't own you. A story where you begin, slowly but surely, to trust yourself again. Each one of these habits was born out of a real moment, in a real place, in my life or in the lives of people I love. People from Denver to Boston, from little diners in Kansas to late-night buses in New York. They aren't theories, they're tested. They don't require a perfect schedule or a perfect mindset, just a willingness to try, to begin, to take one small step, even if your voice shakes. Especially if your voice shakes. Because the truth is, the smallest habits often build the strongest foundations. If you're still here, it's because some part of you is ready, not for more pressure, but for more possibility. If this message is speaking to you, like it, subscribe, and let's walk this journey together. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Indianapolis, the kind of day that feels like it's dragging its feet through molasses. I was sitting in my parked car outside a Walgreens, staring blankly at the steering wheel, holding a receipt I didn't even remember collecting. I had just bought cough drops, a bottle of water, and a chocolate bar I didn't want. Not because I needed any of it, but because I needed a break from myself. My head was loud, my chest was tight. And I remember thinking, how did I get so far from the version of me I used to dream about? That wasn't a rock bottom. It was something more dangerous, a slow, quiet drift. I wasn't in crisis. I was just numb. Getting up, doing what I had to do, falling asleep tired but unsatisfied, day after day. And the worst part? I didn't know how to fix it. Because no part of my life was bad, but none of it felt mine anymore. I didn't need a life overhaul. I needed a gentle reroute, something subtle, something kind. That's when I started to notice something curious. The days I felt just a little better weren't the ones where something big happened. They were the days I drank my coffee without scrolling my phone. The days I left a Post-it on my desk with one encouraging word. The days I looked in the mirror and didn't avoid my own eyes. These were small, almost imperceptible things, but they made the day feel a bit more like mine. And when I repeated them, they started to stitch a new pattern into my life, one that felt more alive. So no, this video won't offer you a miracle, but it might offer you something better. Proof that a different life is already within reach. All it takes is 5 small steps in your own direction. Technique 1. The first light ritual. It began in a quiet apartment above a bookstore in Missoula, Montana. I was visiting a friend, Sarah, who had just left a long, painful relationship and was learning how to live alone for the first time in years. What struck me most wasn't how she handled the silence, but what she did with the very first moment of her day. Every morning, as soon as the light began to creep through the window, she would wrap herself in a gray knit sweater, sit by the edge of her bed, and light a single candle. She didn't say anything. She didn't journal. She didn't stretch. She just sat, watching the flame dance, while the sun slowly touched the walls. I asked her once what she was doing, and she said, "I'm reminding myself that the day doesn't own me. I do." That phrase stayed with me, because so many of us start our mornings in reaction mode. Phone buzzing, inbox screaming, mind already sprinting before our feet hit the floor. We give the first light of the day away before it even reaches us. But Sarah had taken that moment back, and it gave her a kind of calm strength I couldn't ignore. So I tried it. No candle, just a breath. One deliberate pause between sleep and everything else. And in that pause, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Space. A space where I could decide how to enter the day. Not rushing, not already behind. Just arriving. That's what the first light ritual is. It's a reclaiming. It doesn't have to be long or poetic. It can be one sip of tea on your porch in St. Paul before the kids wake up. One song played softly in a kitchen in Savannah while the sky turns gold. It's not the act itself, it's the intention. It's about meeting the day before it meets you, reminding yourself in the stillness that you are not the background noise of your own life. You are the one who chooses how it begins. Technique 2. The 10-second pause. I was walking through downtown Chicago when I saw a woman spill her iced coffee on the sidewalk. It splashed across her shoes, and she just froze. No yelling, no panic, just a breath. 10 seconds of silence in the middle of a busy street. People rushed past her, impatient and unaware. But she stood there like she was anchoring herself against a storm. Then calmly, she walked back into the coffee shop. It was such a small moment, but something about it felt sacred. She didn't react. She chose. And that changed everything. That's when I started playing with what I now call the 10-second pause. It's exactly what it sounds like. 10 seconds before you speak, before you reply, before you press send. 10 seconds to check in with yourself before the moment runs away with your emotions. I used it first during an argument with my brother in Boston. We were both heated, and I could feel that familiar burn in my chest, that need to win, to prove. But I paused. I literally looked down at my feet and counted to 10, slowly. And when I looked back up, my voice came out softer. Not because I'd backed down, but because I'd come back to myself first. 10 seconds doesn't seem like much. But in that space, you make a decision. To act, not just react. I've used it before interviews in Los Angeles, before tough conversations with friends in Seattle, even before answering a child's difficult question at a park in Tampa. The 10-second pause isn't about being passive. It's about being present. It creates a window between trigger and choice, and inside that window lives your power. You don't need hours of meditation to become more intentional. You just need 10 seconds of courage, 10 seconds of breathing room, 10 seconds that remind you, you are not your first reaction. You are what comes after. Technique 3, the pocket note practice. It was an early morning in Salt Lake City, and I was sitting in a laundromat waiting for a dryer cycle to finish. Across from me sat a teenage boy in a faded hoodie, nervously fidgeting with something in his pocket. At one point he pulled it out, a folded up piece of paper worn at the edges. He read it silently, then tucked it back like it was something sacred. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked him what it was. He looked up and said, "It's from my grandma. She wrote it when I moved in with her. Says I'm braver than I believe. Then he smiled, quietly, and looked down at his shoes. That moment never left me. Because sometimes what we need most isn't a solution. It's a reminder. A sentence that helps us feel like we can face the next hour. That's how the pocket note practice began. I started writing small truths to myself on scraps of paper. Nothing profound, just words I needed to remember. You're allowed to rest. One step at a time. You already survived worse. I'd fold them and slip them into my wallet, my jacket, my car console. Some days I didn't even read them. Just knowing they were there was enough. Eventually, I started leaving them for other people, on library shelves in Durham, inside airport bathroom stalls in Denver, tucked into my partner's coat pocket in Minneapolis. Notes like, "You matter more than you think." Today needs you. And what I noticed is this: we all crave permission. Permission to pause. Permission to hope. Permission to keep going. These tiny pieces of paper, so easy to overlook, became anchors for me and little lifelines for others. You don't need to write a novel. You just need one sentence, folded into your day. One sentence that finds you when you forget who you are. That's the power of the pocket note. It's not just paper, it's presence. Which of these small habits speaks to you the most? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know what you're taking with you from this so far. Technique 4. The half-finished thought. It was raining in Portland, Oregon, because of course it was, and I was pacing around my apartment, rehearsing an argument I hadn't even had yet. You know that feeling? When you're 3 hours deep into a conversation that's only happening in your head? I kept crafting responses, perfect comebacks, all while my coffee sat untouched on the counter. At some point, I caught myself mid-sentence, staring at my reflection in the kitchen window. And I thought, what if I just didn't finish this thought? What if I just stopped and walked away from it? That's where the half-finished thought was born. It's a practice in interrupting your own spiral. Because let's be honest, most of us don't need more time to think. We need a way to break free from overthinking before it becomes a trap. I started experimenting. Whenever I caught myself mid-rant, in traffic, in the shower, in line at the grocery store, I'd say out loud if I had to, "Not now." Not to suppress the feeling, but to protect the moment. Because what I realized is this: not every thought deserves your full attention. Sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is let a thought remain unfinished, not explored, not resolved, just paused. Because if you let every fear build its case, it will win by exhaustion. But if you leave that door cracked and walk away, you leave room for something better to arrive, like clarity, or peace, or simply silence. Now, when the inner noise gets loud in the middle of my day in Santa Fe or on a red-eye flight from Atlanta, I stop. I take a breath. I leave the sentence hanging. And I walk into the next moment like it still belongs to me. Technique 5. The mirror thank you. It was late at night in Cincinnati. I had just gotten home from a long day, the kind that leaves you questioning every decision you've ever made. I was brushing my teeth, eyes tired, shoulders slumped, and I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked like someone I didn't recognize, drained, distant, worn out from trying so hard to hold it all together. I almost looked away, but something in me said, "Just stay. Just one more second." And so I did. I stayed. I stared at myself like I was seeing someone else, someone who was trying their best. I didn't judge, I didn't fix. I just whispered 2 words I hadn't said in a long time. Thank you. That's it. No big speech, no dramatic pause. Just a simple, quiet thank you to the version of me who had carried the weight of another day. It felt strange at first, like talking to a stranger. but over time, it started to feel like I was talking to someone I could trust again. That's how the mirror thank you became a nightly ritual. Before bed, I look at myself. Not to correct, not to criticize, but to acknowledge, to witness. Because for most of us, the mirror is where we practice disapproval. We glance, judge, adjust, and walk away. But what if it became a place of recognition instead? What if it became a place where you said to yourself, I see you. I know it wasn't easy, and I'm still here with you. I've done this in hotels in Phoenix, in airport bathrooms in Charlotte, in the quiet of my own home. No matter where I am, that moment roots me. It reminds me that I am not just a project to be fixed. I am a person to be honored. It takes 10 seconds. But those 10 seconds build something no one else can build for you. A relationship with yourself that is built on kindness. I haven't always known how to be kind to myself. In fact, there was a time when I didn't even believe I deserved it. I was living in Philadelphia, in a one-bedroom apartment that looked fine on the outside, but felt like a cave on the inside. The kind of place where the walls slowly start to feel closer than they used to. I had a good job, respectable even. I showed up, I smiled, I performed. And every night, I'd come home and sit on the edge of my bed in total silence. Not peace, just absence. I wasn't falling apart in an obvious way. No one around me would have guessed what was happening behind the mask. That's the hardest kind of struggle. The one that doesn't scream for help, but silently asks for permission to exist. I remember one night, specifically. I had just come back from a networking event. Shook hands, made small talk, wore the right blazer, said the right things. And when I got home, I kicked off my shoes, walked straight to the bathroom, and stared at myself in the mirror. There was no crisis, no drama, just the quiet ache of living in a life that didn't feel like mine anymore. I slid to the floor, sat with my back against the wall. I didn't cry. I just breathed. And that's when it happened. I reached for a notebook I hadn't touched in months, and without thinking, I wrote, "I miss me." That sentence wrecked me because it was honest, and because it was the first thing I'd said to myself in a long time that wasn't wrapped in guilt or expectation, just truth. That night, I didn't try to change everything. I didn't make a plan or write goals. I just promised myself one thing: to try, to notice myself again, to look in the mirror without flinching, to treat my morning like something sacred, even if only for a minute, to pause when I was spiraling, to say thank you, even if I didn't feel like it. And slowly, without me realizing it at first, I started to come home to myself. There's something deeply vulnerable about deciding to stay with your feelings, to stay with your body, to stay with your story, even the parts that no one claps for. We live in a culture that tells us to move on, to push through, to get over it. But healing doesn't happen at the speed of scrolling. It happens in the pause, in the breath, in the whisper you say to yourself in the dark that no one else will ever hear. I think about that version of me in Philadelphia often. I don't resent him. I don't judge him. I thank him. Because he was the one who decided to try, when everything in him said it wasn't worth it. He was the one who began laying down the bricks for a foundation that would someday hold joy, and strength, and softness. This isn't a story of overnight change. It's a story of noticing, of remembering, of turning small, quiet moments into sacred ones. And maybe, just maybe, it's your story too. There comes a moment, somewhere between the ache and the awakening, when something shifts. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, but like a door unlocking from the inside. For me, that shift didn't arrive with answers. It arrived with questions. What if I am not broken, just buried? What if my exhaustion isn't laziness, but grief for the parts of me I've silenced to survive? What if the future I want isn't built by doing more, but by doing differently? That was the beginning of everything. I didn't become someone new. I became someone honest. And in that honesty, I found energy I thought I had lost. Not because my circumstances changed overnight, but because I started showing up differently inside them. When you wake up and give yourself the first moment of the day with intention, you send a message to your entire nervous system. I matter here. When you pause, just for 10 seconds, before letting the world pull you into its current, you say, I am not just reacting, I am choosing. When you carry a quiet sentence in your pocket, or tape it to your steering wheel, or tuck it into your lunchbox, you're not escaping the hard parts. You're building reminders that you are still here, that you are still trying. And that counts. The transformation didn't make me louder. It made me steadier. I stopped needing people to validate my worth. I stopped chasing milestones just to feel safe. I found something better. A sense of being rooted, even when the ground felt shaky. And now, when I look at my reflection, I don't flinch. I pause. I soften. I nod. I say thank you, and mean it. And if you've made it this far, maybe something inside you is stirring too. Maybe you've felt that slow drift away from yourself. Maybe you've mastered the art of performing okay while quietly wondering where you went. But here's the truth, and I need you to hear this. You are not too far gone. You are not too late. You are not unworthy of gentleness just because you've been strong for too long. There is a version of you, already alive inside, that is not defined by exhaustion, shame, or comparison. A version that wakes up and doesn't dread the day because you've made peace with the person facing it. A version that doesn't need to earn rest or love or belonging because you've stopped treating yourself like a problem to be solved. That version doesn't arrive by force. It grows quietly, like roots under the surface, fed by the smallest, most deliberate acts of care. So let me ask you something. What would your life look like if you practiced one small act of return each day? 1 minute to yourself before the noise. 1 pause before the spiral. 1 note in your pocket. 1 sentence left unfinished. 1 look in the mirror that says, "Thank you for carrying me this far." You don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need a perfect routine or the approval of anyone watching. You just need a beginning. And the courage to protect it, softly. These habits are not rules, they're invitations. Not because you're broken, but because you're becoming. Not because you failed, but because there's something in you still reaching for more. And here's the part that still humbles me every day. When we begin to treat ourselves with care, the world around us slowly starts to reflect it back. Our relationships deepen. Our resilience grows. Our presence sharpens. It's not magic. It's momentum. 1 choice, 1 breath, 1 whisper of permission to come back to yourself. So if no one has told you lately, let me be the one to say it. You deserve to feel at home in your life. You deserve mornings that start with intention instead of urgency. Days that hold space for your heart. Nights that don't end in self-criticism, but in gratitude. And none of that starts with changing everything. It starts with noticing something. The version of you that can hold peace and purpose in the same breath, that version already exists. You don't have to search for them. You just have to clear a path home. Remember the boy outside Charlotte, North Carolina? the one who tied one shoelace slower than the other each morning. Not because of laziness, but because it gave him something small to control in a life that felt too fast, too loud, too much. I think about him often, because in many ways we are all that boy, searching for something to hold on to, something that makes us feel just a little more steady in a world that spins whether we're ready or not. That shoelace was never about the knot. It was about the moment, the pause, the ritual, the power to say, "This 1 second is mine." That's the quiet brilliance of the 5 habits we've walked through today. They are not designed to fix you. They're not flashy or loud, but they are fierce in their softness. They take back moments we've been told to rush through. They slow us down long enough to remember we are not machines. We are human beings with hearts that bruise and hands that still want to create something gentle, something real. The first light ritual brings your attention to the beginning, reminding you that you get to choose how your day starts, not your email, not your calendar. The 10-second pause catches you before the words leave your mouth or the reaction leaves a scar, giving you a moment to choose intention over impulse. The pocket note practice gives you a portable lifeline, a truth you can carry close when the world feels far. The half-finished thought lets you walk away from the spirals that never serve you, giving you the power to disengage without guilt. And the mirror thank you. It brings you home. It reminds you that even on the days you didn't do everything right, you still showed up. You still carried it. You still deserve your own kindness. These aren't just habits, they're invitations to reconnect with the you who's been waiting beneath the rush, to turn ordinary moments into sacred ones. To begin, not by doing more, but by seeing more of yourself, your strength, your softness, your worth. So here we are, at the edge of this message, and I hope more than anything that something inside you feels different now. Not overwhelmed, not pressured, but seen. Maybe even a little more grounded. Because these small things, they matter. They build, they ripple, they plant seeds in the quietest corners of your life. And with time, they bloom. Not all at once, not for show, but deeply and beautifully and in a way that lasts. And if all you do tomorrow is tie your shoelace a little slower, take one deep breath before answering. Leave yourself a note that says you've got this, or pause a spiral mid-thought. You've already begun. You're already walking back to yourself. And that, my friend, is how change begins. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. Not with a leap, but with a step. Not with fixing, but with remembering. You don't need a new life. You just need to start noticing the one you're already living. And gently, deliberately, make it yours again. If this spoke to your heart, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a whisper too.